they were just sort of crushed by all of that, and they both, Brian and Jason, basically decided, maybe we're just going to stay home, and we're just going to, we got to, going to enroll in college or something. Neither one of them ended up doing that, but but they wanted to move on, and so I was just hanging out, having a rough time with Disincarnate, looking at having to repopulate the band with new members. Brian ended up coming back. Tommy had bailed when Brian and Jason did, because he just thought, oh, it's over, But he came back, and so I had everybody except Jason, and we were starting to rehearse, and we were working on new material. But that's when I got the call from a guy that I knew as a music reporter, Mike Gitter. You might know him. Mike Gitter used to be a journalist. But that year, 1994, perhaps the previous year, 93, was his first moving on from working in music journalism to becoming an A&R guy at a record label. And that label was Atlantic Records. And so Mike calls me up, and I said, hey, man, hey, we just did an interview last year. What are you up to? You want another interview already? I don't have anything new, He's like, no, I want to see how you would feel. He said, look, I am working at Atlantic Records now. I'm A&R at Atlantic. And I'm like, oh, cool, man. Great. That's awesome. Yeah. And I want to know how you would feel about playing in the band Testament. And I was just like, I love that band, so I would feel pretty damn great about it. And like, what happened? I mean, I heard Alex left. I mean, I thought they had got Glenn Alvarez from Forbidden. He said, no, he was just a fill-in. He did that live EP, but he's not the permanent guy. They don't want him as the permanent guy, or maybe he had something else going on. I don't know. Maybe I don't know whether they turned him down or whether he turned them down, and that, I guess, that's sort of irrelevant. Sorry, I was adjusting my phone here. Started to slip. Yeah, so I was just talking to him about that, telling him how much I was into the idea, and he said, "Okay, cool. Eric's gonna call you like in about 3 days. Eric's gonna call you. So start learning. Check out what their set list is. Like if you've been to a show, or know anybody who's been to a show or whatever, check that out, and start learning those songs. Just start learning the most popular songs." And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll start doing that. And like half an hour later or less, Eric called me. It wasn't any 3 days, and he wanted to know if I knew any, and I said, I don't really. I mean, I know the odd riff here and there because I'm a fan of the band, but I don't know any full songs. I don't know any of the solos, but I can do it. And at that point that I said I can do it, I did not know whether or not I could play Alex's solos. I had no idea. I was confident I could play their riffs, but I had no clue whether or not I could play the more tricky stuff in Alex's solos. I knew I could play just the melodic bits and the flashy bits, but the really technical, ripping shred stuff, I didn't know whether I could do it off the top of my head. But I told him I could. It turns out, luckily, I could. But he said, well, he goes, look, here's really the main thing. We're working on a new record right now. We're in writing mode for a new record, and I just want to see like how you fit in. So how your style would be. I mean, that's all well and good if you can play Alex's stuff. That's great. That would definitely be required. But even more important, you need to be able to come up with some cool, on an album. And I was just like, well, let's do it. He goes, well, look, do you have a 4-track? And I said, yeah, I do. And I told him what kind I had. He said, great, that's exactly the one I have. So what I'm going to do is, we got this new song called Dogface Gods. I got it demoed on the 4-track. I'll bounce that down to 2 tracks, and then I'll send you the tape, and you will have 2 tracks to come up with solo, and send it back to me. And I was like, let's do it. FedEx arrives like the next damn day or something like that. And I immediately start working on the solo to Dogface Gods, and harmonies and all, because I had 2 tracks to work with. So I came up with the part, recorded it, came up with the harmonies, recorded those, and then sent it off to Eric, and he loved it. And that's actually, I mean, I had to replay it because that was just on a little cassette 4-track. I had to replay it for the album, but I played it pretty much exactly the same. In fact, I'd gotten a little better at playing it, and the feel overall was better because it was real drums. It was, it was John Tempesta, laying it down, so it was even came out even better. And yeah, so and they flew me out. I played their the set they had given me, because once they decided to like the solo, they told me the set list and told me to get to learn it. And I think I had a couple of weeks, and that's all I did was sit. I left my apartment in Tampa because I had confidence of getting this gig, and so I left my apartment in Tampa, and me and my girlfriend had broken up anyway. Broken up because of the Disincarnate tour, a story as old as time. And so I moved in with my mom and stepdad in Lakeland, and sort of took over their living room. That's where I was sleeping and living. I had all my stuff jammed in a corner, and I started working on learning the Testament set. And I just did that for 2 weeks solid. They flew me out, and I tried out and got it. So that's how that went.
Man, that's awesome, dude. And like another example, like of making a band, like you had mentioned earlier too, about like grunge was getting popular, alternative music. Testament got heavier, and I really think that's what set them apart. And that had a lot to do with your contributions. Melodically, yeah, they had the songs written, but your collaborations with them too. And like even The Gathering, the same thing, where those two records, Low and The Gathering, really gave that band fresh life in an era when maybe metal wasn't at its most popular or most commercially viable. So after you did the Testament gig, you actually auditioned for Megadeth. And I remember reading this story in a Guitar World like 20 years ago, man, even longer than that. So what was that like? And I think we might have talked about this in the past, but Marty Friedman actually recommended you as his replacement.
I don't think for a moment that I was the only person Marty recommended. I think he probably gave a handful of likely candidate names to Dave, and I was among them. And so for that, I certainly thank Marty for thinking of me. Unfortunately, it was just absolutely terrible timing for me health-wise. I didn't know it at the time, but I was deathly ill.
Right.
People had noticed. This is why I ended up sort of losing everything and ended up being almost basically homeless on the streets of in the Bay Area before my family ended up, my sister in particular, fetched me back from California on a Greyhound bus, and I kind of lost everything because I was losing my memory. I was losing my eyesight and my memory. And my behavior was going crazy. And it's because this tumor was growing underneath my brain and it had become massive and it was putting massive pressure on my brain. And yeah. So yeah, I forgot where your question was.
Oh, just the whole process with Megadeth. And I know that like
yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So I had toured to support The Gathering, but my behavior was so off. Like, dude, I missed a bus call. Like, I don't even know how many times. I would just wander off. I just watched a clip from a show, I think in Pennsylvania or somewhere last night. Someone sent me the link, and it was Testament on stage, and I think somewhere in Pennsylvania playing True Believer, and it was The Gathering tour, so it was Lombardo on drums and me on the lead guitar and DeGiorgio and Chuck and Eric, and I watched it and I played the song well. I was performing great, but I hardly remember that tour at all. Little flashes here and there. I remember one of the times I missed the bus. I wandered out of the venue after sound check, met a girl who was hanging out early. She coaxed me back to her house pretty much. with promises of food and laundry and, other things.
Get a shower.
Shower and, other things. And so I went with her. And, after everything, I ended up falling asleep. That's another thing. I was becoming very lethargic. I would fall asleep on a job, like that. And I ended up missing bus call. They of course carried on without me. The show can't stop. You got to find your own way, So I had to do that a couple of times. And I also remember something about like being late to bus call for the very first bus call, which was, it was in a parking lot at a grocery store nearby Chuck's house and Chuck lived in, I think he lived in San Leandro at the time. And so I had to catch the BART over there and make my way up to the bus with all my stuff. And it was apparently a tense situation. I don't remember it, but I was late. I was like 3 hours late or something like that. They waited for me because I needed to get my stuff into the, but my brain was just gone, man. I could play. That's the only thing that I could do. So at the end of that tour, the Gathering tour, they cut me loose, and I was so out of it. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Things didn't affect me emotionally the way they should. Everything was off. All my reactions, all my behaviors. I remember being told that I was not going to be continuing with the band, and I was like, whatever. I was like, it didn't affect me. It would have hurt me really bad if I'd have been of my right mind. But of course, if I would have been of my right mind, none of those things that led to that would have happened. I wouldn't have been late for things. I wouldn't have missed buses and, things like that. But they just thought my behavior was really erratic. And talking back to them years later, like, dude, we thought you were on crystal, man. We thought you were a meth head. We thought you had become a massive druggie somehow. I was like, dude, I won't even smoke weed with you, bro. I'm like, yeah, that's why we couldn't understand it, but that's the only thing we could think of to explain your behavior. We never thought of like a tumor, and that's it's justifiable because frankly, we all knew that exactly that happened to the drug thing,
Right.
happened to them. And so a lot of my symptoms were very similar, so it's what they thought. So they cut me loose. And at that point I had still managed to hold on to my loft studio, my apartment with my studio in it. And it was a loft. It was in like the artist district. So I was just there, and that's when I got a call. And I think the call was from Dave. I think Dave called me. And I was like, yeah, I'd be very much into it. I'm free. I'm able to do it. And I said, I'd like about X amount of time to learn the songs. He said, well, you got a week.
Whoa.
I was like, okay, I better get off the phone with you and get to work. He said, good. He was like to hear that, It's like, good. And
that is crazy.
Yeah, so I started working on the material. I don't have memories of it, but one of the ways in which I know I was working on the material is that exactly what I did with Testament. I had this stereo when I got the offer for Testament that had a 5 CD cartridge type chamber. Like you pulled the cartridge out, loaded it with 5 CDs stacked on top of each other. You put the cartridge back in, almost like loading a VCR tape, or something, and then it would just pull them out of the cartridge and play them. And when I was learning the Testament gig, I loaded that thing up with all 5 Testament discs that were out at that time. All 5 of them. Legacy, New Order, Price What You Preach, Souls of Black, and The Ritual. And I just started learning. And so years later, a couple of years later, like a year after my surgery, something like that, I ended up getting in touch with Big Al Lucchese, who runs Soundwave Studios, where Testament rehearsed. And it's like, dude, there's some of your stuff has been stored in one of my rooms for the past year. You know, it's like, and he's like, if you want it, I'll have it shipped out to you. You'll have to pay the shipping when it arrives, but I'll get it all loaded up onto the truck and get it sent your way. I think it came on a semi, and fortunately, a lot of my record collection and my stereo was in there. Or actually, no, my stereo didn't make it. But you know what did make it? That 5-disc cartridge that went inside that CD player. And I opened it up. I was like, man, it feels fully loaded. What the hell's in here? I opened it up, and you know what was in there? Megadeth discs. Dave called me back, and he said, James, we need you sooner. I'm going to fly you to LA. You're going to meet us at the House of Blues, and you're going to rehearse there. And I was like, well, I've only learned, X amount of songs so far. And he goes, then let's focus on those. Let's do those. So that's what I did. And I went and I auditioned. I remember being there. I remember meeting Dave and the other, guys, and being backstage and, being in the dressing room at the House of Blues in LA. And I remember walking out on stage. I remember walking out onto the stage to start the audition. I have no memories of anything else. Obviously, I did not get the gig. The guy who did get the gig was there. What's his name? Al Petrelli. Al Petrelli was there. He was hanging out too. I guess he auditioned right after me, something like that. And he ended up getting the gig. I ran into Dave. Let's see. That was 2000, I think. I ran into Dave in about 2003, perhaps 2004. So at some point after my surgery, after I had recovered largely, and it was one of the first Gigantors, and Nevermore was on it, and I had Nevermore had hooked me up with backstage, and I was going back to hang out with them and meet them in their dressing room, and my little brother was with me, and my little brother's favorite band is Megadeth, by the way. So as we're headed down the hall to head towards Nevermore's dressing room, here comes Mustaine, headed right down the middle of the hallway. And, I moved my brother to the side, and, I'm like, yeah, let's get out of his way. We're going in, he's going out. So let's give him, give the people that are going out the room. And we moved over to the side, and Dave comes strolling past, and he gets about 5 inches past me when he stops suddenly and then backs up a couple of steps and looks at me and goes, hey, James. And so we got a conversation, and I told him, I said, dude, I don't remember anything about my audition, but I'm not surprised you didn't. He goes, dude, when I heard what happened to you, it made so much sense. I mean, I thought it was drugs because, I've got experience with that, and, your behavior just sort of seemed to point towards that. But now that I know what it was, that makes so much sense. And I was just like, yeah, dude, I don't even remember playing the songs with you. I don't even remember learning them. I was just like, how did I do? And he's like, oh, you did fine, man. You played fine. It wasn't about, you played great is what he said, actually. Yeah, no, you played great. It wasn't that. It's just that, you looked like a homeless person and you kept falling asleep. But he just said, oh, you played great. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that you looked homeless and you kept falling asleep. Any downtime that you had, you were zonked out.
Man, well, that's got to be intense, but at least, you were able to play and you kept your skills and through that terrible experience of, having that medical problem, which was probably, something that was tough to overcome, in the least.
Yeah. No, it was. Yeah. It was very hard. I'm my own worst critic, number one. I do know for a fact exactly where and how I screwed things up royally. I just, I recognize that not everyone's going to notice that because they're just there having a good time. And they're not putting it under a microscope. They're not, so the trick for me was to try to enjoy it, even though I was really royally screwing up. Because I'm so hard on myself that I sometimes get in a really bad mood. But, you know, a couple of factors for me. I had not played on stage in 16 years prior to those gigs. I had 16 years away from the stage. So for me, I just grossly underestimated how much time I would need and how much practice I would need on the songs to be able to really be able to play them live without a hitch. And the thing is that I used to teach this maxim all the time, which is not to practice until you have it down, you know, until you've learned. You don't practice to the point of where you've learned the song. Practice so far beyond that point that you almost can't make a mistake. Almost anything could happen and your muscle memory is just going to carry you through. You know, that's really the way to practice for shows, you know, for performing with a band. And I also just sort of, I didn't pay respect to the other thing that, you know, everyone should always remember. Here's something for younger listeners or people that are, you know, musicians listen to this, which I imagine quite a high percentage are. Rehearsal is for rehearsing. It's not for learning the song. You learn the song on your own time. You practice it on your own time. Then you show up at rehearsal and now you're performing with the band. You're rehearsing the performance, not learning the material. And, you know, I just did not properly prepare. I thought I was properly prepared. But as the date encroached, I started realizing that I was not as prepared as I wanted to be. And then I found out something about the venue that kind of, this is a pretty funny story. I found out that there is no, because one of my rituals before going on stage, always for years, one of the things that I always got to do, it's not even a ritual, it's just a basic human need. I take a leak because I like to hydrate, you know, before a gig. I like to be nice and hydrated. Because I'm susceptible to dehydration, like seemingly more than, like it happens to me more than it should. And so I like to really stay hydrated when I go on stage. And so part of that is you got to be able to take a leak right before you go on, because you're drinking a lot of fluids. And so I had this concern that I needed to be able to go to the restroom right before going on stage. And there was no restroom backstage. The only restroom in the entire venue was up the front through the crowd, sold out crowd. Could not get to it. So I had to go outside well in advance and take a leak outside and get myself back in and get ready. And, but because of my fear of, you know, I don't know, I'm going to call it fear. It was just a nagging thing in the back of my head, you know. Hey, you know, you don't want to be up there trying to enjoy yourself playing and having to, you know, piss like a 10-deck donkey. You know what I mean? You don't want to be about to burst. And I wanted to be able to drink water. But what I was unconsciously doing for days leading up to the gig, because I had found out about that, like a week out, is I just wasn't drinking enough. I wasn't hydrating. You see, I'm hydrating during this interview. I hydrate a lot. But I did not for days leading up to that show and on the show. When I took a sip of water, it was just a little sip, just enough to wet my mouth. You can probably see me on the video taking a sip here and there. But it's a very tiny little sip. And I was dehydrated. And what happens when you get dehydrated, for anyone who hasn't been, is you start to get a brain fog and you get real shaky. And I had brain fog and was real shaky. Pile on top of really not, because I probably could have powered through. I mean, dude, I take a look at me playing on the Gathering tour with Testament. I just saw that, like I said, I saw that performance of True Believer from Pennsylvania last night. I was playing great, played fine. And I had a tumor in my head, So with proper preparation, you can power through just about anything. Dehydration, a tumor, whatever. But I was not properly prepared and dehydrated on top of that. So, yeah, had some technical difficulties as well. The Kemper was screwing up. Hence why the Kemper is gone now. I no longer have a Kemper.
Yeah, I was watching the video and I saw you over at the Kemper making adjustments or trying to see what was going on and like listening to the cabinet. And I saw both days. And I mean, unfortunately I wasn't there in person, but I watched the live streams. But man, I can relate. Like I usually take a whiz before I go on stage and play too. And I peed a lot outside in Europe because it's like you're saying.
Kemper replacement, by the way.
Oh, nice.
But also the KSR Vesta and Hera. Those are also part of the system that I've got set up to replace the Kemper.
Are you running that Friedman through like one of those Seymour Duncan power amp pedals? Or are you like running it through like a power amp?
I'm not currently. I'm using the IR loader for recording.
Oh, gotcha. Right on.
It has integral IR, which captures tube power amp, cabinet, and microphone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they don't make it super easy to flip the camera in these things. I guess I can't flip the camera. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's the system I'm using now. You see that?
On.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't fully integrated the IRX yet, but I'm getting ready to do that. So yeah, let me flip this camera back. Yeah, get this charger back on. Sorry for the shaky camera work here, folks. All right,
it's all good, dude. We've had a couple of technical difficulties on my end. It's all good, man. And thank you for showing us that. That's awesome, man. And as a matter of fact, I watched a video of you reamping before our podcast, and that was pretty cool. I'm gonna start doing that myself, and it was awesome to see how you did it. Super simple and super effective. And I noticed you're holding a guitar. What kind of guitar are you playing? You still playing your? Yeah, there it is.
This is a Comparison Tack Special, which is a neck through design.
Sick.
I love that fade right there. Beautiful guitar. It is my weapon of choice for most things. I have a large selection of other guitars, a number of comparisons, and also just a lot of, classic stuff like Telecasters, Stratocasters, Les Pauls. I got a 335. I even have a Casino, and Paul Reed Smith. I got some Paul Reed Smiths, so I have a large selection of guitars. I think I'm at 23 right now. That's not, I know a lot of people who have way more guitars than me. So, but this is what I go to for most things, for most of my, session work, and certainly for when I play live. Of course, this one's set up in D standard tuning, which is, I think I put it in for the Living Monstrosity shows because Death on Spiritual Healing was tuned to D.
Right. Freaking. So, do you have anything planned, maybe for touring or any shows in the near future or in 2024?
No. I was hoping that we would do more Living Monstrosity shows. Travel around a bit and do some, maybe do the boats, do the festival, the Euro festivals and stuff like that. I kind of hoped that we would do that. So the other guys in Living, in the Living Monstrosity lineup, that project is, they're all super busy. They have so much going on, all of them. I'm the only one who's like sort of homebound. They're always going out on tour. So it never really came to fruition, and they were already talking about the Left to Die thing, the idea of doing that, I think, was already coming up around, when we were doing the Living Monstrosity. And that, I think it was just sort of built in from the get that they were going to go tour actually behind it rather than just doing a show, or a couple of shows. So it was always a little bit more set up as more of an ongoing concern rather than a one-off or two-off event like Living Monstrosity was. So I have not. I did kind of hope, and to that end, I think for about, it's been 2 years since those shows, and for the first year, I stayed on top of those songs. I mean, dude, it would be a lot easier for me to relearn them now, but I've already it's been a year now since I rehearsed them, but I was rehearsing them at least 5 times a week for several months. And then I got down to a couple times a week for the last few months of that first year. And then I just trailed off, and it's been a year since I practiced those songs. So I would need the time to learn if they even wanted to do more. And hopefully it'll come to, I respect those guys' schedules, man. They hustle and they all got stuff going on, and, respect to all of them for that. They're all busy men, and rightfully so. They're in demand.
Well, I was wondering if you ever thought about or were ever contacted to do Death to All or anything like that. Were you ever contacted to do the Death to All thing?
No, I never was. And without going into any details, I think I'm going to chalk that up to a couple of things. Number one, I think they've got their lineup. I think they quit. They've slowed down on the floating different people in and out of it. I think they've kind of settled into a thing, and that's Bobby and Max's gig now, and I'm cool with that. That's their gig, Back when they were floating people in and out of it a lot, having different people on different tours, and because I'm not really up on the history of exactly what all has happened, lineup wise and everything with that project, but so just in addition to the feeling that they've sort of settled on their lineup, there's also, there's somebody involved with it who's not involved with it anymore, but back when they were cycling through different people, there was someone who did not want me at all, and so I suspect that that's initially why I never got a call. This is also part of the reason why a particular project that I was working on years ago got put on a shelf, because of the same individual. There's no point in naming names. It's no longer an issue, but there's, on either front, but, at some point there's damage done,
It's an unfortunate thing, man. And I think that, it's a shame, because, there would have been some good music there, and it would have been something that the fans, me being one of the fans, definitely would have liked to see. And I mean, I'm grateful that we got Living Monstrosity, and hopefully you guys will come back and do some touring, or maybe a few more shows, or even a live.
That would be really cool. I'm super open to it.
That would be awesome. And like to see you guys, doing those big festivals and stuff like that would be killer. And, I was kind of hoping when they announced that Milwaukee Metal Fest was coming back, I was wondering if they would have you guys on there, because I'm like, man, that would be freaking huge to have Living Monstrosity on there. And, maybe hopefully in the near future we get something. But is there anything in 2024 that you have coming out? You got a new record coming out, or any big releases or anything that you're working on, or even production wise?
Nothing that I can talk about right now because it's not set in stone. But certainly my gears are turning, and I'm trying desperately to finish up my studio here so that I can, because I'm still in renovation mode, because we're doing the living side of it right now, and we got a lot of renovations going on, including my studio, and so I need to finish that because I'm not going to go to another studio and record. I'll probably, unless I'm hired and flown in somewhere to play on something, and they want to fly me in and play, which I'll happily do. When it comes to me doing my own projects, I'm gonna record it myself. So I got to finish that up, and I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. But I am playing on a number of releases. I'm playing on the new Internal Suffering. I'm playing on the new Just Before Dawn, the Swedish death metal band Just Before Dawn, and the Colombian death metal band Internal Suffering. I'm on both of their new releases. I'm set to be on the new Embryonic Autopsy LP. So I'm always on something. There's others. There's other things that I'm forgetting right now. There's probably 4 or 5 other things that I'm playing on that are coming up. Becoming, that's another one. I'm going to be on the new Becoming release. My buddy Alec Cordero, and
yeah, man. I was going to say, Alec, awesome guitar player as well, and
yeah, great dude.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy, and that's awesome, man. And you've made a lot of really great records, James. You've been a part of so many legendary bands, and you've done so much already. At this point, is there anything that you haven't done that is still a goal that you're striving for?
Well, right now, pretty much all of my striving is towards improving on this thing. For the first time in years and years and years, I will go ahead and say decades. I am playing sometimes 4 to 5 hours a night. Most nights. I sit right here. This just so no one mistakes it, this is not my studio. My studio's in there, and it's in a state of renovation at the moment, a state of construction, so it's not fit to show. But this little room is just my little rehearsal room where I practice. I've got my pedal boards, my guitars are all piled over there. I got other guitars on on a stand over there, and I just sit in here and play, and yeah. So that's what I'm doing. I'm striving to get better on this instrument.
And that's awesome, man, because I mean, you've been playing for a really long time, as a lot of us have, and just to keep the fires burning to want to improve is awesome in itself. And it just goes to show that we also have stuff to learn and everything. And I was watching Facebook the other day. I saw one of your reels or videos on your timeline, and it was you playing that 335 and playing some jazz type stuff. So when you're not, melting faces or writing death metal tunes or this and that, what do you like to listen to besides metal?
Well, I think you might be talking about where I was playing Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush, the song "The Answer."
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Sort of a bluesy, a blues power trio, blues rock, heavy rock, and a little bit psychedelic power trio from Canada. From I think that track was from 1974. Yeah. Yeah. So, but all kinds of things: jazz, fusion, anything that I can sink my teeth into. I'm playing. I'm trying to get better at just my blues playing, my jazz, my fusion side, which is, while I have recorded some fusion tracks on my solo albums, I did, Red Alert from Tony Williams' Lifetime, which originally featured Alan Holdsworth on Convergence. and I did Odyssey by the Dixie Dregs with Steve Morse on my Feeding the Machine album, and also on Feeding the Machine I did Race with Devil on Spanish Highway by Al Di Meola. Now what I do when I cut a track like that is I just hone in on that track and I practice the shit out of what I'm going to play, because I would not say that I'm a fusion guy in terms of like, I probably couldn't go to a fusion jam and hold my own and actually play legit fusion with those guys. There's someone like Bobby Cobley. I mean, Bob Cobley's a fucking awesome fusion player. Jazz guy. He can whip that stuff out, man. He's got that stuff in his back pocket. I do not. I have to work hard at it. Well, and Bobby doesn't work hard at it. Clearly, he does and has. But the playing that comes natural to me is what you've heard from me on albums all these years. I'm trying to incorporate, except for when I specifically have done a cover song, to try to push myself in another direction that I want to incorporate into my playing. And I succeed in little small bits, little bits and pieces of things will get incorporated. Like I remember from Give Me all this, little. I don't know how well that's coming through, but that real percussive with, of course, my hand doesn't want to cooperate now. That sort of thing. The real muted.
Yeah, that really staccato-y sound.
Yeah. But not just the steady stream of it, little bursts and little accents with it, little, like that's something that I picked up off Demiola, and I picked it up years ago, man, decades ago at this point, and I still do that stuff, still in my playing as part of it, So
yeah, a lot of your classic solos that's in there a lot too, and like you were one of the first people I heard using sweep arpeggios in death metal and stuff like that, and that really brought. That's kind of the stuff I gravitated towards in your playing with stuff like that, was the melodicism, your alternate picking little ditties you throw in there, and then the arpeggios and stuff. Like it sounded like it's like you took the neoclassical thing and brought it into death metal.
Yeah, I'm cool. I wouldn't say that it was strictly a neoclassical vibe, but there's elements of it, no doubt, because I was certainly influenced by a lot of those players, all those early guys, that, I mean, Yngwie himself to a certain extent, but I would say that I was probably more grabbed and learned more from, guys like Vinnie Moore and Tony McAlpine and, even Joey Tafoya and, guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's the shrapnel guys is absolutely, like I hear a little bit of like Greg Howe in there too, and like Joey Tafoya for sure, and Tony McAlpine. And I mean, they all have like their classical, influence on their playing, but it's something I can hear in your playing as well.
Yeah, they were definitely all a big influence, and I'm happy to say that, as I got into the music business, I've had the pleasure of working with quite a few of them on various different things in various roles.
So if you could narrow it down to one thing that you heard that changed music for you, what was it? What was it that you wanted? What got you into playing guitar?
Randy Rhoads. I would say Randy Rhoads. I mean, I used to jump around on my bed and, with a broomstick and pretend, play Kiss songs, But by 1980, I was done with Kiss. I finally saw him live in '79. It was super exciting. It was super great. And then they put out Unmasked and The Elder and, Lick It Up and stuff like that. And I was just like, and I went off Kiss at that point. But yeah, so I was, but then I was into just like Tony Iommi and like, KK Downing, Glenn Tipton and and all those guys, Alex Lifeson, was super into them. But then I heard Randy and I lost my mind over him, I was just like, I'm going to play guitar. I'm going to be a guitar player. That's what I'm going to do. And I actually had a ticket to see him at what was meant to be their very next show. It was a big festival type show, big show, and here in Florida. And a couple of days before it was scheduled to happen, is when he died in that plane wreck. So I remember I was in junior high school, I think. Yeah, I was in junior high, and I was so saddened, so wrecked. I still had I wish that I would have just kept the ticket because it still had the Ozzy logo. It was back. It was kind of a fancy ticket with the logos printed on it, and I wish I would have kept it. But I was so discouraged that I was so bummed about Randy. The last thing I wanted to do was go to that show and see Pat Travers replace Ozzy on stage. As much as Pat Travers is great, got a lot of great material. I wanted to see Randy. I didn't want to see Pat Travers. And Ozzy dropped off the bill completely, obviously, and the Pat Travers band took his place. And so I ended up selling my ticket, I think, for like $11 to a classmate. And I wish I had just kept it. To hell with that $11. But when you're how old was I? Maybe 14. I don't know, something like that. $11 is back then, especially $11 was a lot of money, and for a 14-year-old to have in his pocket in 1982 or something, whatever.
Right.
And so I sold it. But he was the real impetus that pushed me over the edge to, yes, I'm going to play guitar. But I was already wanted to play guitar prior to that. And I'd actually been asking my parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, anybody. Just, all I want is a guitar. Birthday, Christmas, whatever, I don't care. I just want a guitar. Just give me a guitar. Any kind of decent guitar was probably out of most of their range to give as a single gift to one kid, when there's multiple kids, and also I'd think my dad just didn't want the noise, which is kind of sucked because my dad played guitar, and he had a guitar. And to the extent that I learned anything, it was the little brief snatches that I could get to play. When he would sit with me and show me a chord or two here or there, that's when I would get to play guitar. But I wasn't allowed to play his guitar when he wasn't around, for the most part. But he showed me all the basic chords, I call them the cowboy chords,
All the open chords, yeah.
Yep, showed me all the cowboy chords. And the first melody I ever learned, shaving a haircut. He showed me that. And I was like, So I started learning a couple little things like that. And then, so I just sort of took off from there. I ended up buying my own guitar, just working summer jobs and buying my own guitar.
Man, that's awesome. Well, James, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, man. It's been nothing but educational and historic as well, dude. And like I said, I really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
Just say thanks to everybody who still gives a crap what I'm doing. And by all means, join me over on my YouTube channel. I'm slowly ramping up to doing, more content on that. Lots of playing, show. I'm going to be showing people how to play my solos on the Death and Obituary and all that. So now's a good time if you want to learn that stuff from the source and not all the funky tabs that are out there online. You can join me on my YouTube channel, which is is Jame Murphy Producer.
Nice.
Damn it all in one, Jame Murphy Producer. That's how you find my YouTube channel, and maybe Matt can put a link to it in the description of this video. And
Absolutely.
you can join me up over there, and that's the best way to sort of keep tabs with me is YouTube. I have an Instagram, but I'm not a big Instagrammer. I'm more of a YouTube and Facebook kind of guy. I'm old. Give me a break.
Well,
Instagram's confusing.
It is hard to use. I agree, man. But anyway, James, thank you very much. I'll see you at your YouTube channel. I will definitely put a link to your YouTube channel in this video.
Subscribe and motivate me to start putting these solos up and tab and all that good stuff.
All right, James, thank you very much, man. You have a wonderful rest of your day, dude.
You too, Matt. Great talking to you, man.
Have a good one.
You too.